Good morning, zookeepers, and welcome back. Today we're on Planet Zoo, and I'm going to be making an enclosure for the Okapi. And my idea behind it, my slight inspiration, as you can, well, right now I'm messing up the path quite badly, as you can see. But my inspiration behind this was actually the Jurassic Park Visitor Centre. I wanted those sort of like concrete walls with then the kind of like what do you call it? I'm forgetting right now. I can't figure the name. Thatched roof, there we go. The kind of like thatched roof look. I'm going to have a big opening to this for them to go in and out of, and then just a normal zookeeper door at the back. Now, with this enclosure, I could kind of do finish it to a point. I'm not too sure how to sort of improve my building yet, or haven't thought of any ideas of where I want to go with it on the inside. So I have left the inside pretty plain. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that bit in a moment. Right now, I'm making a fence. Have this really simple idea of using like the different woods to make like a pretty nice little, interesting looking fence. Again, this kind of also reminds me of something dinosaur themed. That being prehistoric park fences where they were just made out of wood. Now, looking back to it, I didn't add any supports to it, so we're just saying the logs are really deep into the ground, so we don't have to worry about them sort of toppling over. But nevertheless, I try and make it less square, because a lot of time I do make these enclosures pretty square, but I had a fair bit of decent time to make this enclosure, so I was just sort of like messing around, really seeing what I can do, things like that, and where I can go with it. So I did add like an interesting shape to the enclosure rather than it just being square. Then I added a little bit more height to the building, because obviously I've got this raised path that goes all the way around it. Yes, it's slightly glitched into the building, and this is what I mean. I need to figure out how I want to sort the inside out. Do I want to redo the path? I'm quite sure, yeah. I put my little handy archer down there so I can like sort of grasp the height of the guests, so I don't like put the roof on top of them. And we just go around like normal, just attaching it. Then I do have a lot of little gaps, so I kind of rough and tough sort of stick the thatched panels into those gaps. I mean, at the end of the day, some thatched roofs are neat, some aren't, and this is going to be a less neat one. In the end, I can always go back to it and try and neaten it up and try and hide it so it's not like bits sticking out as much as they are right now. But again, that's just something to do in the future. I wanted to enjoy building, not get like bogged down onto one simple thing. I never ever really go for 100% perfection with my builds. I don't see the point. For me, going 100% perfection would mean like I'd spend ages on that roof, and I don't want to get like bored, you know what I mean? I don't want to drown myself out in a sense of I've just spent half an hour trying to sort a roof out looking neat. I want to have fun. I want to enjoy the enclosure. I want to enjoy the animals moving around it. So, and you know, I just enjoy myself. Eventually, I can always come back and neaten it up. That's the beauty of this game. It's not finished. I can always go back to it. Anyways, add another circle with a ring of windows. This just allows a bit of natural light in there. And I was sort of messing around. I was like, do I want a thatched roof on top of this? And in the end, I had a fiddle with it. And then I was looking at it from afar, and I didn't really like it. But then I was going, oh, I may as well add back to the grey. And it does add like quite a nice theming to it. And as well, I get the corners pretty nice, so I didn't have to mess around too much, and it allows me to have some big skylights at the top to let more natural light down into the middle. As you can see, the inside of the enclosure is a bit rough. At this point I was like figuring out how I'd try and decorate it nicely inside. I had a few ideas, and then it just, as you can see right now, it isn't really working out for me, and I didn't want to spend ages. I didn't want to, like I said, I had a fair bit of time, but again, I still have stuff to do, so I didn't have all the time in the world to sort out. So I just sort of neaten up the poles. I bring some like extra wood in there just so it looks nicer on the inside, and then in the end I probably will come back to doing the inside walls, trying to hide that path that's glitched through it, and maybe look a little bit neater in there. But to be honest, I'm going to be mainly outside the enclosure trying to look for the Okapi, especially with how dense I'm going to make this enclosure. Now, they're pretty like shy creatures anyways, and my idea behind it is that I want plenty of hiding spots for them. So I want this sort of like dense jungle, which will make it kind of interesting, especially when trying to find them. When I was recording a bit later on, luckily for me, a lot of the time they stayed near the pond and were swimming a fair bit, so it's quite easy to get shots. And then a little bit later on, they sort of disappeared. They were just hiding in all the dense foliage that I'd put around the enclosure, which again for me was really interesting. You can see right now I'm trying to get the waterfall rock like similar to the rock in the enclosure. I sort of gave up and got that's close enough, and then I'm just going to surround it with rock anyways. Behind it, and the reason why I did that wall and that door there is to make it look like that is the room for the keepers to go in and like clean the water for the pond and clean the water for the waterfall, and also like sort of like a mini maintenance shed. I use this sort of like corrugated plastic roof, and I quite like the fact it overhangs, so it looks like it's going to be hiding the pipe work for the water in the waterfall. As you can see, like this sort of thing there, I don't know what you call it, like a little bit of raised area. Then I add some extra water, like sort of effects to it to make it splashing and everything. And yeah, I'm quite happy with how that turned out. I make that sort of section really mangrovey because what I was doing was just using plants that they like in their enclosure. So then I was like, oh, it's mangroves, I may as well make use of that and decorate the pond a little bit in that kind of sense. And then on this little hill here, this is where I sort of like, I just bounce between both of them, just like, oh, a bit there, a bit there, a bit here. And I'm sort of like bouncing around, trying to like slowly make it more dense. I feel like, to be honest, this was the longer bit. Like the building when I was making this seemed quicker to make than me actually making the enclosure pretty dense, putting those footpaths in there where it looks like it's walked through, and then trying to leave open areas where it seems pretty decent as well for like looking over a main track, so you actually get to see them and won't have to look for them. So I get some interesting shots from like the other side of the fence into the enclosure, and it just adds like interesting lines of sight, which I feel like are quite important in enclosures. Sometimes when you like look at an enclosure, it's just completely dense with material and you can't see through it. It looks cool, but then it also looks better when you've just got a nice line of sight, not all the way through, but it has like an interesting sort of like look to it. So here I am, like I've added the paths in that I want them, and then I'm like, well, I'll add a bit more plant matter here and there, a few more rocks, make it look a little bit interesting. It makes those paths stand out more, so it's not just all completely flat. A lot of time I do make my enclosures flat, especially when you look at my older ones that I made at the beginning of the year. I sort of started messing around the terrain tool a little bit more. Arguably, I could do it a lot more, to be honest, because my enclosures are, when you do look at them, are pretty flat. But this one I feel like I did all right in. I made an interesting shaped fence. I made it so it wasn't completely flat, and there's different sort of like levels, using rocks to really make those levels stand out a little bit more than they would have if I just used just a normal terrain brush. And yeah, again, I was really happy with how this turned out. As you can see, I'm just adding like the finishing touches: food, water, bedding, enrichment. I made sure that every piece of enrichment in this enclosure, it was really large, so I had plenty of places to put all the different enrichments in, so I could go and watch them use these, and it'd be kind of interesting for myself to go and see. Now, the only things I did off camera, I added the like signs that said what the creature was inside the enclosure, the informational stuff. As well, I added a secret dome, which you'll see in a moment. I think it's a little bit later on in the track. But you can see they look really cool in this enclosure, especially with some of the shots I managed to get where you could actually see them. Like I said, they do really disappear really well into this enclosure. Here we go, there's a secret dome. So we had that scratching post that's just surrounded by shrubbery, and you couldn't see it from the path or from the view raised area that well. So I thought I'd add a little dome in there. And when I was like getting shots, they weren't even going up to it. So I was like, oh, well, at least I got some shots of people inside the dome, I guess, to show. Anyway, a little bit later on, one of them uses the scratching post, and I just missed it. But at least I get the ending of it, and you can see it from the dome. And it's like a really interesting angle to watch it from, so I thought that was kind of cool. Secret dome, secret viewing space. You know, this is the only area you'd get this shot. And there's a little person that's come in and... yeah, I'm really happy with it. Like, to me, this is really cool. I don't know what you guys think about it. Let me know in the comments. But yeah, with this build, I've had quite a bit of fun making it. I think it took me, maybe 2 hours. I spent an hour. A little bit later on, did a lot of housework and bits and boring stuff like that, and then I went back to it, and I think I maybe spent another hour or half an hour just touching up like all the plants and things like that and placing all those down. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with this, and Yeah, I've added this to the workshop as well. I'll try, if I remember right. If I remember, I will put a link in the YouTube comments or the description anyways. So if you want to add this to your parks, you can do, and if you do, let me know. Like, I'd love to see if you make any improvements to it, especially the buildings. I'm not too sure how I would do the inside, so if you add this to your parks and you decorate the inside, please show me. Like, send it to me on like Instagram. That's a good place to get hold of me. And yeah, I'd love to see what you guys do with this build, how you would improve it and all the rest of it. But for me, I'm very happy with how this turned out. Again, I just need to sort of mess around with the indoor part of the enclosure, but that's something to do in the future. Anyways, if this video has given you any sort of ideas or inspiration, I hope it has, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Until next time, I'll see you later.